Well, hello and good morning, everybody. How you doing? This is Jeremiah. We are having a webinar on Excel. Everybody knows Excel and loves Excel, but you can really do a lot with it. And it's just been so many times in my career where, someone's wanted me to program something, and I'm like, we can just do that in Excel. you know, there's no need to engineer something when you can just use it. And so that's a lot of what we're going to be showing today. I've got a couple super quick housekeeping items for you. I don't know if you noticed at the top of your screen, there's a view options little drop down thingy. And from there, you can exit full screen mode just in case you need to get to something on your computer. And make note of that Q and A button at the bottom. In fact, I'd recommend clicking it right now. Just click that Q and A button. There's your question box, and get it situated, because what's nice is you're going to be able to see the answers to other people's questions. So it's a really good companion, but also just be a little quicker for you to type in questions. Don't want you to miss anything when you need to ask a quick question. So do keep your questions there in the Q&A box. Other than that, we are recording this, so you're going to be able to watch this again as early as Monday. It'll be available on the website. So, hey, that's all my yammering that I need to do. So I'm going to get this kicked on over to Jake.
Very good. Thank you, Jer. Um, as Jer said, questions, questions, questions. Please, please, please ask those questions as we go through this. I'm going to be covering some pretty simple things, just getting the understandings of, Excel. This is me. While I am the irrigation specialist and do a lot of training and stuff, I will consider myself an Excel enthusiast. One year for Christmas, I did ask for an Excel VBA coding book, and that's what I got. So a nice 4-inch thick book, and just trying to learn all I can about coding, that kind of stuff. And whether that's nerdy or not, it's a great resource. So I am by no means a professional, but do consider myself an enthusiast, we'll call it. So going from there, really going to try to hit home a lot of the terminology just from a general sense of the matter there, and really what Excel has to offer, show a few examples, talk about some best practices that I've come across, and just what to consider when starting using Excel. And then we're really going to get to try and make some macros, understanding what that means, just even some general tools to speed up your potential everyday use of Excel if you're already in that stuff. So and then if we can get to it, just talking about creating some templates, and even how to copy and reuse some macros to other worksheets and stuff like that. Questions are definitely not going to be left till the end. Please ask those, and we can answer them as we go if it pertains. So further than that, I do want to just say in general, what we're going to try to cover is really opening a door to new tools, new features, so that you can play with them on your own, and know that the internet is a great resource. Looking up all kinds of different websites, there's tons out there. Mr. Excel is a great one, but just know that that's what you're going to want to do after watching this here. So we're just going to go into a little bit of terminology, just going down this list real quick. Understanding the basics. We talk about spreadsheets, we talk about worksheets, but what does it actually apply to? Because once you start getting into macros, VBA, really trying to customize stuff, it does matter what they're called. So the first thing is the entire file itself is the workbook. That workbook is, it could contain several worksheets or just a simple worksheet. And you could call that Excel file your spreadsheet, but just so we know, the workbook is the entire file, and it does hold worksheets. Within a worksheet, obviously, we have cells, and those cells make up that whole grid. It's one individual little block that you enter your text, your numbers, your formulas, everything into. Your columns and your rows are pretty self-explanatory, but those are the vertical and then horizontal versions where those cells reside. And as you manipulate things and need to adjust and reference, these are what we call our headings, our column heading or our row heading or a row header. And you can do a lot of little tips and tricks within these bars right here. So we'll kind of cover those when we get into the hands-on. Our ribbon should be pretty self-explanatory. It matches really well with a lot of how these programs, CAD, any of the Microsoft Office suites, any of those, they do have the ribbon now. And that ribbon basically makes up all of the tools that you have available. And within that ribbon, you do have your different tabs that you can click on that go to all the different tool sets. Your cell reference is a particular cell, and that is the combination of a row and a column. And it's generally started with the column as the identifier, and then you follow the row, and that is your cell reference. So as we start either coding or just recording these macros and you're trying to look at what it's saying, these are the types of things that you're going to start to look for, is what cell it's referencing. So for this example, it's M14. And then you can imagine getting into a larger set of cells is what we call a cell range. And that range can do all kinds of different things. Again, in formulas, that range can be a combination of these columns and rows. So you're looking at that upper left corner as your first starting point down to that lower right corner for that ending point there. So L7 and R17 is and everything in between is what it's counting for. So a formula is going to be an equation, and again, we're not going to get into every possible formula in this webinar, but just as an understanding that if you're going to enter a formula into a cell, it always starts with an equal sign, and it will start to register different formulas for you there. But you can see there I've got a cell range that it's going to add up A1 through A15. So it's just a combination of using all these different pieces of terminology here. Now this formula does have a formula bar, and this is where you can see kind of the entire formula. If you select a cell, it shows up here in the formula bar. And with that, we have a function button. So in the formula bar, there is a function option, and this function is a really great resource to see all kinds of different pre-existing formulas and events that Excel already has to offer. So being able to select a cell, click that function button really does help guide you to possible choices of what you're trying to achieve. And then lastly, that we're gonna really focus on as we get into it. A lot of people might know that this is here. We're going to use the ribbon to get to our macros, but you can very quickly click this little button down in the lower left corner and start recording a macro. And if we're going to simply define what a macro is, it's just a recorded combination of functions and processes that you can save to repeat automatically later on. So that's what we want to get into, and that's what we want to be able to create and start to understand. So really, I want to kind of take a step back still and look at the capabilities and what do you actually do, or what can you do within Excel. And if we're going to start at the most simple level here, let's consider this just using Excel for a spreadsheet. And this could just be simple text, some numbers, and you're just manually entering everything in. And a lot of people just use it that way, which is totally fine. You can format things and make it all pretty. But if we start to harness some of those capabilities and we move down this list, we can start filtering these lists. We can start putting formatting on certain cells that are conditional on certain criteria. We can start creating what we call data validations and drop downs and really start to limit what the user and how the user uses that spreadsheet. We can insert all of the different calculations from simple sums to several combined formulas and really start to do some pretty crazy stuff. And then obviously getting into then the charts and the graphs and really some of this presentation stuff is really great. Where we're going to fall again is how we can record and code functions to perform specific tasks. And a lot of what we do is, AutoCAD is great to generate all of our schedules and stuff like that, but sometimes we're limited to the looks and we really want to kind of improve upon those, or maybe create additional columns of information and stuff like that AutoCAD can't. So we want to be able to speed that process up, and that's where those macros and stuff come in. And we won't get into this too much, but even being able to create dialogues and forms to harness those macros that are done to even improve upon that a little bit more. And one thing that I found as I was doing this is there's now newer data entry options. So I'm going to show an example of this, but you can literally take a picture on your phone with the Excel app and convert it into a spreadsheet, which is very, very cool. So I'm going to show just a couple examples here. So we're totally open to hear from you guys too. Use the chat window for this here, but what do you use Excel for? I'm going to show you a couple examples of what I've used Excel for and what I still do. Stuff like this, where this is an actual water management budget tracker so that we can enter data from specific sites to be able to cross-check that against what water use should be, to what the plants need, to what we're actually watering based on our water bills and that kind of stuff. And we're just really getting a breakdown of where we sit on our sites. A simple water use reduction table. Some cities require stuff like this, so maybe you're given a spreadsheet that you have to fill out. Again, just keeping all of the power of Excel for these actual formulas and stuff, so you don't have to do it manually, first of all, but it helps limit that error potential. A new one that we've been playing with here is, and a lot of people have been asking about, is shade calculation stuff, where we've got to provide a shade, calculation for our landscape plan. And so how do we quickly generate a lot of the numbers that they are asking for and put it into a readable and a logical order for those reports? And then a lot of irrigation stuff is falling under this MAWA and ETWU deal, and to be able to provide not only a summary of stuff, but keep a nice report of what all the zones are and really all the different numbers and stuff that correlate to that is just really helpful. So here's the little snapshot. Since I can't do this live on my phone here, I took a few snapshots, and this is kind of how this app works. And so it says, all right, I want you to take a picture of the chart or the PDF or whatever you're trying to do. It lets you start to crop what it's going to analyze and what it's going to look at. It's then going to process that picture based on that that clipping, and it's going to come up with a tentative, we'll call it, kind of chart that it starts to highlight specific spots that might have errors. It doesn't know exactly what you're either aiming to have, or it can't read it quite well. So you can actually, at this point, change any of this stuff and then insert and it gets put into a spreadsheet automatically. And so these are all in their own cells, and I didn't have to enter a single thing. So just that speed, that process of being able to transfer from a PDF even to or a JPEG to an actual Excel with actual clickable items and workable items is just a really cool newer feature. It's similar to the AutoCAD tool now to import a PDF as line work. It's just that whole saving that time is really, really great. So with that, we're going to kind of close up with a few best practices that we want to keep in mind as we get going. And the things that I'm going to show today, let's just kind of have this in the back of our mind. We can keep this for, obviously, as you start to look into this a little bit more, just play with it, see what works best for you. But what I found is when you're dealing with formulas, you got to be careful with how things are input, and really starting to break them down into several cells if you need to, because as you get more complicated equations and looking at different things and trying to account for stuff, trying to find why it didn't work or it stopped functioning, or you're trying to have somebody else look at it and they can't follow it, it's a lot better if you can just break things down to the end result type of a thing. And we'll kind of go over that in a little bit. But really, again, clarity is better than looks. And what I mean by that is if you're going to do all kinds of stuff off to the side and help with these equations and you don't want to show that stuff and you're just hiding things, it's hard for people to follow. So maybe all of those on the side things are a completely different sheet. And that really comes to this formatting and layout stuff where the preparation of a good spreadsheet is super, super important. You want to make sure that you're thinking about the future of what this spreadsheet's going to do. Are things going to be changing all the time or getting added to all the time? And really trying to compare where you're entering stuff to what you're hiding to what you're showing. It's just really, really important. Another key one from a formulas perspective is avoid fixed numbers. A lot of times you can just simply do an equation and you can have maybe a variable set to be the number that you want to divide by, and then you are good, you get the answer. But maybe that number changes, and if it's a fixed number spread across all of your formulas, it's going to be really hard to catch all of the different places that you've got to update that specific number. So trying to make more of a dynamic equation so that you can have an adjusted number that auto fills and recalculates that equation is going to be super, super important. And then the last one I'll leave here is just, we're talking about macros. I have on here, use caution with macros. You'll see, and what we'll do is try to clean up what we do record, but you'll see that when you record a macro, it's not the cleanest way that it records. It's going to record exactly how you click, and some things just get muddled into that recording that aren't necessary. And so if you can find from those function buttons and what Excel actually offers, if you can find something that is already existing, definitely try to use that. But again, just use caution for that. So with that, Jer, I know we've had quite a few questions already come in, but do we want to answer any now, or are we good?
Yeah, we can kind of recap a couple of those, like, just wait, well, just like, it was news to you that we could import a photo right into Excel. So to a lot of people watching, it's what version of Excel can do that, and what is the mobile app to do that? is a very common question here. And so I'm assuming that's just the Excel app for iOS. I don't know if we checked if they have one for Android. Is that right? And is that also a part of Excel for the desktop? And if so, do you know the version, or can you clarify any of that?
Yeah, sure. So I wasn't able to clarify if the desktop version has that function, but the app that I have is on iOS. It did make mention that there is the Android. I didn't look into it because I don't have an Android, but but it's definitely something that's just on the phone. And as soon as that Excel file is made, though, you can it's in an Excel format, so you can just send it to yourself and open it up that way. So the translation is pretty seamless still, even if it is just on the phone. Um, but but yeah, so
Oh, great.
all right, let's get going. So um, I did want to start out with we're going to really quickly send some of these schedules over just so we have them in Excel. But what I want to do for this example is we're going to want a watering schedule. But a lot of times this watering schedule, they're curious on what their watering is going to be throughout the different seasons. And so since this is kind of that summer worst case scenario, what I want to do is I want to send this Excel or this report over to Excel. And I've already set up just some generic or general termed stuff for my spreadsheet so we can work with it here. So I'm just going to send that over to a spreadsheet, and I'm also going to send a plant schedule. And just to keep it simple, I will just do a trees report here, but I do want to include costs because maybe from a planting plan perspective that we do want to see what not just our costs are for the trees, but we want to be able to include what maybe the labor is, or maybe the markup on the stuff, or any additional kind of thing that we want to do. And then from there, obviously tweak the formatting. Maybe we want the fonts different, that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and simply run that. We'll go to a spreadsheet and we'll say okay, and get him back over to a spreadsheet as well. So you'll notice that I got my Excel file here. Let's expand him. And we've got our planting file here with this all broken out. Now, what I want to do before we really get into the nuts and bolts of formatting and creating our macros is I want to kind of take this little section at a time, and I want to show just some tricks, some everyday use stuff as we start just integrating with what we're trying to set up here. Because this isn't really macro worthy per se, this is just how I want to start cleaning up my formulas and really getting this to be a little bit more dynamic. I'm going to just sort of cover a couple tools that you may or may not have known. So when setting up these worksheets, and for this example specifically, and this can apply to, again, different things, but I want to take this content here and I want to be able to make several versions of it. And if I'm going to go back to my best practices, and I'm going to refer to that a couple times, but let's think about what we're trying to achieve here, and what's going to be the best flow and the best formatting and that kind of stuff, because I don't want to format right up front because I don't know what my end result's going to be. So I'm just working with content at the moment. But I do want to, if I right click here, I can move or copy. I can move to the end and I can create a copy of this content. So I don't have to just start a new sheet and then copy and paste. It does roll it right over for that. Now we're going to go ahead and call this summer just for this example. This one we can call spring. And I can go ahead and move and copy this guy. I can even select multiple versions or multiple tabs and create copies, and it does as many as I select. So now I have already both, and I can do fall, and I can double click this guy and do winter. So very quickly, I just saved one click of steps to be able to just bring in as many as I had copied. So now what I want to do is I'm, and again, thinking about what I want to change and not have to update in different places. I am going to want to change how much I actually am putting down in a week, right? So we're going to obviously be, this is our overall goal from a worst case scenario point, but maybe I want to go a little bit less here. The nice thing about this schedule already is it does come pre-defined with the formulas to get here. So I could, from a simple workflow perspective, I could just simply change him to 1.25 inches and things are going to auto update. And that's fine. And I can go through here and I can make my changes. But that's a lot of work. On each tab, I got to go through and I got to manually change all those things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up just another sheet here. And we're going to put him at the very front. And we're going to call him seasonal adjust. Just to give it a name here. And we'll go ahead and give it a header here. So the season here, and then this is our inches per week adjustment. Now, talking about these tips and tricks here, if I need to fit, see how that cell falls right outside and it gets cut off because it's too big of content in there. If I simply double click on the right side of that column, it will actually match to the furthest width of what content is in there. So it makes it very, very easy to adjust exactly where I want it. In addition to that, I can select multiple columns and manually change it, and both will match that additional or that initial stretch that I did. So I can be very consistent in all my columns that way, or I can right click and set a column width and it will adjust both or all that are selected that way. But simply put, that guy in the top left corner will actually select everything in this spreadsheet, in this worksheet, to where I can just double click one of those in between columns and it will adjust every column to be the width that it needs to be. So such a great time saver, especially when we have something like this where maybe all of these were for some reason this and it was cut off. Maybe you got a spreadsheet like that. Instead of going through and trying to, manipulate this to be the right size to, still going, to fit everything else like this, all I need to do, select everything, double click, and it adjusts everything. Very, very, very nice little tip there. So back here, what we're going to want to do is put in all of our seasons here. Double click, make it wide, and then our adjustments here. I'm going to go ahead and format, because I know, and this is, again, if we're going to save for formatting for the end, that's good, but this is all my spreadsheet's going to be for this tab. I want these to be in percentages. I want those to be just a little bit bigger, maybe bold, maybe underlined, and get those adjusted. Now, as I put this in, he's going to be my 100%, obviously. Spring, let's go ahead and do 75% of the water. Fall, we can do, let's just say 60, and fall and spring might even be the same. And then winter, let's just say we're doing half of the water. Now, once we have this set up, we're going to use this as our place to make changes. If we need to say, I want to see what spring is at 80%, this is the spot that we're going to use as a reference point for all of our different tabs. Okay. And except for summer, because he is what he is. If we need to run a new schedule from AutoCAD, we just copy and paste into this summer sheet because we know he is just sort of the home base for all of them that we're going to look at. But for all these other ones, we want to make dynamically changed inches per week based on our seasonal adjustment. So how do we do that? Here's another trick. If I select all these tabs, I can quickly manipulate data within any one of these cells, and that cell is going to be adjusted in every one of the tabs. So if it's as easy as saying I want this to say 555, just so we can see how it changes, and I go back to fall, go back to winter, every one of those have changed to match. But obviously I don't want that. I'm actually going to start doing an equation to reference something here. So when it comes to a formula, we're going to go ahead and equals. And for this purpose, I'm going to go to the summer tab, and I'm going to go here because this is what we want to base the number off of. Since summer is our home base for all data here, we're going to go ahead and say this guy, and we're going to times our seasonal adjust here. Okay, but we were on spring, so let's go here and hit enter. So you can see automatically that if I change seasonal adjust spring to 50% and summer was at 1.5, that's going to be 0.75. But the problem is this. Oh, look at all of these are now at 0.75 because they're all looking at this specific cell, right? But we don't want that. So how do we fix that? I'm going to introduce a little bit more of a complex adjustment to the equation here because what we're going to do is we're going to times not only just this number here, but we're going to start a new formula, and that's going to be our lookup. So if we start typing any type of letter, it's going to try to find an equation already from that function. And you can see here's my lookup. So if I use lookup, it's going to start telling me what I need. And these commas start delineating the next piece of information that it needs. So the lookup value is going to be this. Okay. The lookup vector is going to be this. What I'm actually looking through for that deal. And then comma. And the result is going to be this. So instead of just seasonal adjust B3, we're actually going to be much more dynamic for what it's going to be. Now, you can see that he doesn't know what to look for per se here. So I actually, sorry, I made a small mistake, but let's go ahead and do that right now. We're going to insert this here. This is actually what we want to look up. This is our data point here. So since I've got that now, I can put fall. I can put winter. Okay. So let's change that one last time here. So since I'm going to base this off of my summer inches per week, I'm going to look up this guy, and my vector lookup is here, and my last point is here. So you'll notice that since spring was, we should change that back to 75. Spring was 75, 60, and 50%. So if I look at that first column, now all these, oh great. This worked previous here. Let's get this into order. Okay, see if that fixed me there. There we go. Cool.
Now, why did it need to be alphabetical there? Is that what you needed to change it back there?
Yeah, look at the lookup function. If we were to do another more complicated one, VLOOKUP with a table and stuff, it would have found it no matter where it is. Lookup does need to be alphabetical.
I see.
Yeah, that's my bad. So this now is looking at spring, and it's finding that corresponding adjustment here. So now what I can do, I can highlight all these again, and here's my next little trick. If I've already done the formula here, we know that this formula is good, but I need it to apply to all of these. So the problem is this: if I just simply copy him down, you see how he goes wrong because he's actually shifting the whole thing that he's looking at. He's now copied and shifting down. So every time I copy him down, he's going to be looking at the one below type of a thing. So how do we fix that? Well, there's a thing called totally forgot what it was called. It's basically a locked reference here. And so if I go ahead and I look at this specific cell range, and even this, I don't want this to ever go away from looking up right here. I can go ahead and press F4 or put dollar signs in front of them, but F4 will lock it. Those dollar signs means it's going to lock in both column and row. If I press F4 again, you can see that it toggles between the different versions, or none, all, just the row, or just the column. I want it to lock both. I also want to lock both of these guys because that's never changing. That little area there is never going to change. So once I have him set, I can copy this down and it will actually find the appropriate number there. So you see how I dragged him down. It's going to keep the formulas the same, but it's also going to look up based on still looking at all of these corresponding numbers.
So really, whenever you're referencing a cell in a lookup sheet, you really want to do that dollar sign thing.
Most definitely, especially when you're referencing or you're calling out in different formulas the same reference point, because that's one thing that if you start moving things around and copying the formula, let's say this way, if we were going to, that it's still going to always, no matter which way I copy him over, he's still going to be looking at that fixed position.
Is there a hotkey to do that? So like if you're doing that lookup formula, when you go to click on it, is there a hotkey to have it automatically put in the dollar sign when you click on it over there?
F4.
F4. That's okay. That's
F4 will do that. So if I basically said equals a sum of this column here, right at this point, I can press F4 and it will lock that range.
Oh, look at that.
So that if I copy him across, he's still going to be looking at here. If I did not put those in and I copied him across, he's actually going to be looking at the next column over because I copied to the next column over. So yeah, that dollar sign, that fixed locked reference point is definitely crucial if we're going to start using these quick ways of copying formulas down. It's the only way in order to make sure you're not having to redo what you've been going back and forth with. So with that, I'm going to just undo just a little bit here. Redo that. Now we made the change across all of this. You see how we, since we had all three of these selected, it made the change across the board. So the cool part is now I need to clarify just to the user that where they're going to be making these changes. So don't be afraid, again, looking through these tabs here, don't be afraid to either comment on specific items or identify those differently and make a key for it. My go-to and being consistent is a nice light blue is an adjusted spot. Otherwise, you don't change. You don't change anything except for if it's blue. So this could be a fine example because this is our source spot that we're looking. I can make one change here and say, oh, great, all the turf, we decided, yep, it needs 2 inches a week instead. That's going to carry across all of these places because it's looking only at this spot. I don't need to make the change here. I just need to make it right here. So highlight so that people know where to start making changes. Now, maybe I did want to make changes and all the 1.5s needed to be 2. Here's another very cool way to do that. So if it is just the 1.5s, I can select a range. I can press 2. It's just going to enter into the first one. But if I hit Control and Enter, it'll actually apply to the entire selection. So I can hold Control and hit different spots here, hit 2, Control Enter, and it'll change both places. So now I'm saving time, and maybe this guy was going to be 0.75. Control Enter, and it'll make that that entry apply to all of those different things. So another really quick way to make mass changes across different selections, just in a click of a button.
That's pretty cool.
So why do we care about that? Obviously, if we are going to come back over to here and we did have, we were going to run a new schedule and we did modify this ever so slightly and maybe made changes to the days that it was watering and stuff like that, that we were able to send that to a spreadsheet. It's going to come to its own new spreadsheet here. I can simply take this guy, copy him. I can put him into my original. Paste him. Come on. And now he's here, and all of these are still referencing accordingly and adjusting. So I didn't have to, make any more calculations from this point because I have my sort of data dump spot that I can just copy and paste into. And now I have this that I can start to really adjust and fine tune without actually going through and changing any one of those equations, because again, we kept the fixed numbers out of those formulas and we kept them in a place that we can just simply make the adjustments and go. So we're gonna stop there. Do we have any questions before I actually move on to doing the?
Well, just we do want to get into, inserting a spreadsheet into CAD. And then,
Okay,
but I think we can definitely go to what your next thing you wanted to show is.
perfect. So let's go into making a macro. So for this example, or even for, let's call it one of our other examples of being able to insert or customize this this title here. Definitely the longer schedules are going to be more complicated to start getting information from. Like maybe I did want to look at how many 5 gallons I had or 1 gallons I have. This is a fairly simple one, but we're going to go ahead and do this just for fun. I'm going to insert a row above, and I'm going to use a command or a formula that is just one of my favorites, just from a cross-checking type of a thing. So I'm going to go ahead and equals, and that's subtotal. As soon as it comes up, I can hit tab or double click it to accept it. But what I want a subtotal is a sum. So I could type 9, comma, and the reference point is going to be basically where the start of the numbers go to the end. Now, if you want to just be safe, obviously you could throw a number on there just to account for, say this was your template that you created that you can just paste into. You can just make sure it accounts for as many as is going to ever be there. But we're going to go ahead and hit enter to that. So it counted all of these guys. You can see if I highlight them, there's a sum down at the bottom. But maybe I want to start to see how many 48-inch box I have. So this way I'd have to select each one differently to see what it is here. But we're going to use filters. So I'm going to take and I'm going to just click on the number 2 row there, and I'm going to come up over to my data tab, and I'm going to click the filter button. And it's going to throw a little triangle box on there. I'm going to go ahead and highlight everything, double click so that it expands and it fits pretty. But now what I can do is, if I wanted to filter just for my 48-inch box, it's going to slim this down, and my subtotal is going to be a dynamically changed just to what it sees. So it's really, really cool to have kind of like this never changing spot here, that if I wanted to see what any one combination is for that item, that I can see what my revised deals are. And what's nice is I can use that drag out function and go across, and it's going to apply to that next column over. So very quickly, since these are dollars, we can go ahead and throw those on there. I could even highlight the whole thing and press that so that it formats everything that way. But now you can start to see, we can really, really quickly start filtering and see what those costs are going to be that way, just like that. So from here, obviously adding additional columns if you wanted to, add your labor, add your markup, and just make those formulas apply across that way. Very, very quickly do that. So the filters is one of my favorite things to use. And maybe you did have, let's just copy this stuff a little bit. I can get him to go down. Maybe you just had a really, really long list, and the filter is good to list it, but it's still, you lose your header, right? You lose it as you scroll. So being able to select just below the header and go into your view tab, you can freeze that row. And from there on out, it scrolls. So not only do you have a filter, but now you can keep those filters where they are, see your subtotal, and start to scroll through that list. So just a couple little tricks from a easy, legible standpoint for that. But we're going to go back over here and get our macro done. All under 10 minutes. You ready?
Ready.
So from a macro standpoint, we kind of just have to understand before we start doing it what it is that we want to do so that we're not guessing as we're doing it, because that just, it's going to remember everything that you actually do. So my advice is to kind of have a list of things that you want it to do so that you can, it's not recording the time that it takes you to click it. It's literally when you click it. So you can take your time, but we can click the macro button down here if we would like, or we can click the developer tab. And if the developer tab does not exist in your Excel, you're going to go to File, Options, and then Customize Ribbon. And here are your tabs. And developer might be unchecked, so just go ahead and check him and say OK. And then make sure your macro security is set to enable all macros. Because once we start adding macros to an Excel file, it's not just a regular Excel file. It's actually an XLSM. So it's macro enabled so you can perform those functions. It remembers what that is. So with that being all said, I'm going to go ahead and click that little button. We get this guy here, and we're just going to say format cells. Now, anything in Excel and you are recording and you're coding, spaces are not allowed. So you would hold Shift and a dash for an underscore so that you can keep typing. Otherwise, it's all one word or that underscore. And I want to make a little shortcut key so we can just test it. So every time that I hit Control F, it's going to fire this macro. And it would be good to describe things. Again, keep everything documented. What we're going to want to do is we're going to want to bold things, make italic, font to 14 point, even give it the name of the font that you're going to change it to, center, justify, and widen columns. Because as soon as you start increasing your text size and all that kind of stuff, it's not going to fit, and then you're going to have to manually do some of that stuff. So let's just make sure that we understand all the things that we want to do. And then we're going to say, okay, as soon as we hit OK, we're actually in record mode. So you can see it turned into a stop button. So nothing's happening now, but if I start doing things here, we'll go ahead and select those guys, and I can go back over to my home tab. So I wanted to bold, I wanted to italicize, I wanted to change him to 14 point, and maybe I wanted to change him to something else. And so let's go ahead and go. I really, really like this guy. Super awesome. And I'm going to go ahead and double click and widen everything. Okay. So that's what I wanted to do. Let's just say that's my stuff there. So I'm going to stop it. And now I can do stuff and it's not going to remember it. But I'm going to go back over to the developer tab. I'm going to go to my macros, and you can see there it is. And I can edit him. And I can see this is the Visual Basics or VBA application here. And it shows it here in my module. And it shows me exactly what I did. Okay. So it selected that whole row there. And then it started doing a bunch of stuff. Now, I didn't care about some of this stuff, meaning I don't need, and this is where you got to use caution, because this is remembering the old font and then changing it there. So what you're going to see is that we've got two different sections here. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to take out this first section.
And I've even, like, we're really doing a lot of complex formatting. It's even helpful, like, just do one teeny tiny thing at a time into a bunch of different macros, and you kind of copy and paste them together.
Correct,
So
yeah.
that we don't get this big long code of a bunch of different things, and it really helps you see what each individual thing you do results in.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. Just do one thing, see what it did, and then you can start to understand. Because I literally don't need any of this stuff. I just need my size and my name to change. And I also don't want to do this. I don't want to select that every time, because maybe I want to apply this to another set of cells. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to leave that blank there. And you see how at the very end I clicked end, or I clicked off of that whole selection. Maybe I want it to end actually at the first. Maybe I want it to be A1 that it selects, so that's nice and clean right up to the front. So with that done, why don't we go ahead and try that right here. So now I can go ahead and select him, hit Control F, and it just did all of that for me, which is really cool. So very quickly, and again, you got to be careful, because I could select this and apply that Excel, or apply that macro there, which is kind of cool, because now you can really, without it being fixed to A2 through H2, you really can start to apply this macro to different deals. Maybe I did want it to just that one cell. So very, very quickly, I could start manipulating this how I want it, and bring it back over. But maybe I made a mistake. Here's the problem with macros is you cannot undo. You cannot undo past that deal. So we might have to make a macro. I'm going to make a new macro really quick called clear formatting. And we're going to go ahead and just say, okay. And I'm going to highlight just whatever. And I'm going to go ahead and clear formats. And I'm going to stop it. That's what I wanted to do. So with that guy, clear formatting, edit, get to my VBA here, just get rid of that specific selection there. And I can even copy from this macro. There we go. So now if I were to select, let's just say this stuff, and go to my macros and run it, it then clears that out. And it's almost like an undo, but it does help just wipe out whatever you were doing there that way. So let's hurry and assign that to just a button. And we're obviously really running out of time, so we're not putting it in the right place per se. But what I want to do is I want to put in, I'm just going to put in just a simple old square. And I'm going to put in, or I'm going to make a copy of him and put him here. So here we're going to go ahead and make him that color and make him this color. I can right click on any object, and this is why I'm doing it this way, because it doesn't matter. And I can assign a macro to him. And I can format cells for the blue, and I can right click, assign a macro, clear formatting for that guy.
Now, there
So,
is a clear formatting button in Excel, so you did.
well, the clear formatting, I just did it simple, but I would do that and like reset different things,
I
maybe
see.
set my fonts or you know,
Gotcha.
an alternative formatting button, I guess you could call
Gotcha.
it. I get it. Yeah, there is the clear formatting right there. But so now I can simply take this stuff and press that button, get it back to square one, do this, click that button, get it that way. So you can make a template that has these macros built into it and name them, make sure you're clear with what you're doing, and go. So now let's go ahead and let's just paste this back in because that's what somebody wanted to see. This will be our, and so I'm going to copy this guy here, or should I make it pretty? Control F there.
Actually, can you just show real quick? I don't like all those decimal places. Can you format those cells real quick to be 2 decimal places?
Oh, sure. There we go. Right up in your general numbers tab, you have the ability to adjust. So everything that I
Oh,
just
I did.
selected.
I always do it the hard way. I didn't realize it was that easy.
Oh, don't tell them the hard way then, because that's
No,
really easy.
don't. That was brilliant.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll copy this stuff. I'm going to go back over to CAD, and I'm going to type paste special or paste spec. And I'm going to go ahead and paste a link. Make sure it's that guy here. Say okay. We'll place him. And now he's in here just like we did. So if we were to ever make a change, again, seasonal adjust on our winter, and we said he was actually 65, and we see all those numbers adjust. We're not even going to do anything. We're just going to go back over here, and it has updated all of our stuff there. So it does make it really, really easy to keep this sheet, copy those back over into into Excel, get everything you got going on there and go back over here, and it's going to automatically update that specific report. So then you can make all of your pretty reports and do it like that. So any final questions? I know we're 2 minutes over.
One that just popped in from Leland is true. Uh, can you drag and drop an Excel file into CAD? And then, but also, then that the way you did it does update automatically if you change the Excel file, right?
Yes, dragging and dropping an entire Excel file, it might work. I mean, it's just CAD. It's not anything, especially with land effects. But you're gonna have all the different worksheets, so I think you're better off just copying out what you want, because the more items that come in to CAD, the more items it has to try to update, and it does start to hold up until you like accept all the changes that way. So yeah, for the problem locking it up, that drawing locking up,
Exactly. It is. It is. I've seen that so many times. Back in the day, good old Windows 95, it was horrible.
yeah. So the way that I just showed it, and changing your Excel file, even if CAD is closed, the next time you open it, it's going to be the most up-to-date version of whatever's in that Excel file. So those do update automatically in either scenario. So yeah, but again, what we're just trying to hit home is, the speed in which we can start to put things together for this kind of stuff is really, really, really there to just help stuff there. So being able to make those locked dynamic lists so that it looks up based on your coverage and your deals like that is just, life-saving from that type of a thing. So really having that kind of flexibility is really what we're aiming to do. So yeah, any other questions, definitely feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to point you in the right direction and go there. And if there's anything
Well,
else,
we really could just keep going a lot with Excel. So we definitely got some great questions, and I really want all you guys watching, honestly, just please pull up a email right now and just start emailing us right now what you would like for the next Excel webinar, because I really think we really should start to think what's on your mind. Please just open up an email to support@landfx.com right now and just tell us some things that you'd like to see in the next webinar while it's hot on your mind and hot on our minds. And we'll start working on that right away, because it's true. We could go, there's so much. We didn't get into dialog boxes. We didn't get into, gosh, what are some other
Grouping.
things you think of, Jake?
Oh, well, grouping. I mean, all the reference stuff that I got going on here, just really collapsing stuff. I mean, we could go into the calculators that I've made that are available to people, to be able to start adding that kind of stuff, adding new rows, and this is that whole dialog box stuff um, that we could talk about for days. So
Exactly. So maybe just please fire off an email to us right now. Tell us some of these Excel spreadsheets that maybe you struggle with, that you'd love for us to show you how to make better ones and all that, and we'll see if we can form that into the next webinar. Other than that, we are 5 minutes over, so we got to get out of here. So I'm just going to wish everybody a happy weekend and have a good one.
thanks, guys.